My name is Ryan, and I was just passing through. That's all it was, supposed to be a quick stop for gas, before heading back onto the highway. I didn't expect to find myself trapped in a nightmare. It was nearly 2 a.m. when I spotted the gas station. The neon sign buzzed erratically, casting an eerie red glow onto the pavement. The place looked old, abandoned even, but the pumps were still operational. I pulled up, got out, and started fueling. That's when I noticed it. A man standing at the edge of the lot, just outside the reach of the flickering lights. He wasn't moving, just watching. I tried to ignore him, but my skin crawled. My gut told me to hurry up, so I turned back to my car only to find the pump screen blank. No numbers, no prompts, just black. I pressed a few buttons. Nothing. Frustrated, I glanced toward the store, thinking I'd asked the clerk inside, but there was no store. Where the building had been just seconds ago, there was now only darkness. A black void, stretching endlessly beyond the pumps. My breath caught in my throat. I turned back to my car. Heart pounding, the man was closer, much closer. His face was obscured by the shadows, but I could hear his breathing, ragged, wet, like air escaping through broken pipes. I staggered backward, reaching for my car door, but it was locked. My keys were inside. The air around me grew thick, suffocating, pressing against my chest. I turned to run, but there was nowhere to go. The highway was gone. The world beyond the gas station had vanished into a swirling, endless blackness. I wasn't on a road anymore. I was nowhere. A voice slithered through the air, distorted and echoing like it was coming from inside my own head. You shouldn't have stopped. The lights flickered wildly, casting long, twisting shadows across the pavement. I turned, desperate for an escape, and then everything went black. I woke up in my car, parked at a gas station miles away. My tank was full. The receipt sat in the passenger seat, dated with today's date, but stamped with a station name that doesn't exist. I don't know what happened last night. I don't know where I went, but I know one thing for sure: that wasn't a gas station, and I was never supposed to stop. My name is Chris, and I work the night shift at a gas station on a nearly abandoned stretch of highway. I've had my fair share of weird encounters: drifters, sleep-deprived truckers, even the occasional petty thief. But last night, something happened that I can't explain. At around 3:15 a.m., an old car pulled up to pump 4. The vehicle was ancient, one of those 1950s models, with faded paint and rust creeping along the edges. The headlights flickered, and the engine let out a low guttural rumble as it shut off. A man stepped out, tall, thin, and dressed in an old-fashioned suit, like he had just walked out of a black-and-white film. He had slicked back hair and a strange, almost artificial-looking face, as if his skin was too tight. I watched as he slowly approached the store, his shoes clicking against the pavement. The bell chimed as he entered. He walked up to the counter, eyes locked onto mine. "1 pack of smokes," he said, his voice dry and raspy. I turned to grab the pack from behind me, and when I placed it on the counter, he was gone. The door hadn't opened. The bell hadn't chimed, but the store was empty. I swallowed hard and stepped outside, scanning the lot. His car was still there, sitting silently at the pump, but no one was inside. I checked the security monitors. The footage showed him getting out of the car, walking toward the store, but after he stepped inside, he vanished. No sign of him leaving. No sign of him anywhere. My skin crawled. I went back to the counter, heart pounding, unsure of what to do. That's when I saw it. The pack of cigarettes was gone, and in its place was a $5 bill, crisp, untouched, mint condition, dated 1954. I stared at it, my hands shaking. Then I heard Eton engine roaring to life outside. I turned back to the monitors. The old car's headlights flickered once more. The engine let out that same low growl. But the driver's seat was empty. The car backed away from the pump on its own, rolled onto the highway, and disappeared into the night. I called my manager that morning, still rattled. He laughed. "Yeah, you met him. Happens every few years. He always pays. Don't think too much about it. I don't know what I saw last night, but I do know one thing. I'll never work the night shift again." My name is Jake, and I took a wrong turn last night. I was driving through the countryside, lost, my gas gauge dipping dangerously close to empty. Just when I thought I was doomed, I saw a neon sign flickering in the distance. An old gas station. Sitting alone in the darkness. Relieved, I pulled in and parked beside the only pump. The place was ancient dusty windows, a cracked icebox near the entrance, and a rusted sign that barely read open. I stepped out, inhaling the damp night air, and walked toward the store. The bell above the door jingled as I entered. The interior smelled of stale cigarettes and old wood. Behind the counter stood the attendant, a tall, gaunt man with hollowed-out eyes and a fixed, eerie grin. His uniform was outdated, his name tag unreadable. "Pump 3, I said, pulling out my wallet. He nodded, but said nothing, just stared. An uncomfortable silence settled between us. I handed him a 20, and he took it, his long fingers brushing against mine. His skin was ice cold. I quickly turned and left, eager to finish fueling and leave. But as I reached the pump, something was wrong. My car door was open. I knew I had closed it. I was certain. My heart pounded as I scanned my surroundings, but the place was empty. Just the whisper of wind against the cracked pavement. Then I heard it, soft footsteps. Inside my car, I rushed forward, yanking the door open. Empty, but the seat, it was wet, like someone had been sitting there, recently, shaken. I grabbed the nozzle and started fueling, glancing back at the store. The attendant was still there, standing motionless behind the counter, watching me. His grin had widened. The gas pump clicked, signaling it was full. I slammed the nozzle back and jumped into my car, locking the doors. As I started the engine, I made one last mistake. I looked in the rearview mirror. The attendant was standing directly behind my car. I screamed and floored it, tires screeching as I tore out of the station. I didn't stop, didn't look back. Not until I reached a well-lit rest stop miles away. Only then did I allow myself to breathe. I leaned back, exhaling shakily, and glanced at my rearview mirror again. Just to be sure, the back seat was empty. But in the darkness outside, beneath the fluorescent glow of the rest stop sign, stood the gas station attendant, still grinning, still watching. My name is Daniel. I'm a truck driver, and last night, I made the worst stop of my life. I was running low on gas while driving through a desolate highway. The only station for miles was an old, run-down place, barely lit by flickering neon. I pulled in, but something felt off. The pumps were rusted. The convenience store's windows were cracked, and there wasn't a single car in sight. I stepped out, shivering against the cold. The air was unnaturally still. No wind, no crickets, just silence. I walked toward the pump, but before I could grab the nozzle, I noticed something. The price display was blank. The buttons were faded, as if they hadn't been pressed in decades. That's when I heard it. A whisper. At first I thought it was the wind, except there wasn't any wind. The sound came from inside the store. I turned, staring into the dimly lit interior. Shelves were stocked, but everything looked ancient, covered in dust. A shadow shifted near the counter. "Hello?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. The overhead lights inside flickered. For a split second, I saw them standing in the aisles, unmoving, their faces obscured by darkness. Then the lights went out entirely. I backed up. My truck felt miles away. My heart pounded as the glass door creaked open by itself. The whispering grew louder, overlapping voices hissing in a language I didn't understand. The air turned ice, cold, and my breath fogged in front of me. Then I saw it, a figure emerging from the darkness inside the store. Unlike the others, this one moved. Its limbs were elongated, stretching unnaturally as it shuffled forward. Its face was an empty void, but I could feel it watching me, studying me. I ran. I jumped into my truck, fumbling with the keys. The engine sputtered, but wouldn't start. In the rearview mirror, I saw the figures step outside, their silhouettes unnatural and jagged, like broken mannequins, their heads tilted, as if listening. A hand slammed against my window pane, bony fingers scraping against the glass. I screamed, turning the key frantically. The engine roared to life. I floored it, speeding off without looking back. After what felt like hours, I reached a rest stop and called the police. They checked the location. "There's nothing there," they said. "That station burned down 20 years ago." I didn't sleep last night, and I'll never stop at another gas station again. But this morning, I found something on my windshield, a receipt from that gas station. The ink was fresh, my name printed at the bottom. I burned it. But no matter how much I try to forget, I know one thing: that place isn't done with me yet. My name is Ethan. I work the graveyard shift at a remote gas station just off the interstate. It's a lonely job, but it pays well enough. Most nights, I pass the time cleaning the aisles, refilling the coffee machine, and keeping an eye on the security cameras. The occasional trucker stops by for gas, but other than that, it's dead quiet. Last night, however, something changed. At around 2:30 a.m., I saw movement on the security monitor. A figure stood at pump 3, completely still. The headlights of his old beat-up sedan were on, but he wasn't pumping gas, just standing there, facing the station. The way he stood, stiff and unnatural, sent a chill up my spine. I picked up the intercom and pressed the button. "Hey, bud, need any help?" No response. He didn't even flinch. I tried again. Still nothing. I stepped outside, the cold air biting at my skin. "Sir, are you all right?" As I approached, I noticed his face, or lack thereof. The man had no features. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, just smooth, pale skin stretched over a skull-like shape. My stomach turned. Then, he moved. His body jerked toward me with unnatural speed, his arms flailing like a puppet on tangled strings. I stumbled back and sprinted toward the store, slamming the door shut behind me. The automatic lock engaged, and I gasped for air, my heart pounding like a drum. I turned back to the monitor. The man was gone. His car remained, lights still on, but he was nowhere in sight. Suddenly, a sharp tapping echoed from the glass door. I whipped around. He was there, his faceless head pressed against the glass, a twisted attempt at a smile forming where his mouth should have been. Then, the power cut out. The store plunged into darkness, the hum of the refrigerator silenced. I reached under the counter for the emergency flashlight, my hands shaking. When I flicked it on, the man was gone again. A metallic scraping sound echoed from the aisles. Someone or something was inside with me. I had no choice. I ran, bolting through the emergency exit. I didn't stop until I reached my car. I locked the doors and started the engine, my breath coming in ragged gasps. In the rearview mirror, I saw the gas station's flickering sign come back to life, and under the red glow of the neon letters, the faceless man stood, watching me drive away. I called my boss first thing in the morning. He laughed. "Ah, you met him, huh?" he said casually. "Don't worry, Ethan. He never leaves the station. Just don't go outside next time." I quit that day, and I never looked back. My name is Sam. Camping with my older brother was supposed to be fun. He always told me that nothing bad ever happens in the woods unless you're stupid. That night, I learned he was wrong. We set up camp deep in Ashwood Forest, a place my brother, Luke, had been too many times before. He knew the trails, the best fishing spots, and even claimed he could navigate without a map. That should have been my first warning. The second warning came when we found the cabin. It was old, barely standing, hidden between twisted trees like it had been swallowed by the forest itself. The roof had caved in, the door was missing, and inside, there was only a rotting wooden chair facing the corner. Luke grinned. Creepy, right? I didn't like it. Something about the chair, the way it was perfectly positioned, facing the wall, like someone had been forced to sit there for a long time, watching nothing, that night, by the fire. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still watching. I didn't say anything. Maybe it was just the isolation getting to me. But, around midnight, Luke nudged me. "Did you hear that?" We listened. At first it was just the wind. Then, footsteps, soft, slow, circling our tent. Luke grabbed his flashlight and unzipped the tent. Probably just a deer. But when he shined the light outside, the footsteps stopped. No movement. Sound. Just empty woods. Then, he aimed the flashlight at the trees. And that's when we saw him. A man, tall, thin, standing between the trees. Completely still. His face was wrong. Not deformed. Not injured, just wrong. Like it didn't belong on his body. Like it had been put there by something else. His mouth was open, but no sound came out. Luke whispered, "Get in the car. Now." I didn't ask questions. We moved fast, packing nothing, running through the darkness until we reached the car. But as I slammed the door shut and locked it, I saw him again. Closer, standing at the edge of the tree line, watching, mouth still open. Luke started the engine. The headlights flickered on, cutting through the night, and for the first time, we saw his eyes. They weren't human, not angry, not scared, just empty. And then, he smiled. A wide, unnatural smile that stretched too far, pulling his skin like it was barely attached. I screamed. Luke floored the gas, and as we sped off, I looked back one last time. The man was gone. Only the old cabin remained, hidden between the trees, and in the window, the wooden chair was no longer empty. Something was sitting in it, and it was watching us leave. My name is Jake. When you camp near a lake, the worst thing you expect is maybe a few mosquitoes or a cold night. What you don't expect is something watching you from beneath the water. It started our second night at Black Hollow Lake. We had set up our tents close to the shore, where the moonlight made the water shimmer like black glass. The lake was completely still, not even a ripple. Too still. Liam was the first to notice. Is it just me? Or is something moving down there? We turned to look. At first, I thought it was a fish, a shadow, barely visible under the surface. But then it moved. Too smoothly, not like something swimming, more like something sliding. Ethan laughed it off. Dude, it's just a fish. But it wasn't, because when we looked back at the water, the shadow had stopped, right in front of us, motionless, as if it was waiting. Ava shivered. Let's just go to sleep. We tried, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to a sound. A slow, wet dripping. At first I thought it was rain, but when I peeked out of the tent, my heart nearly stopped. There were wet footprints leading from the lake, straight to our tents, and worse, they stopped right outside mine. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't hear footsteps. I didn't hear anyone move. But somehow, something had come up from the lake and stood right outside my tent. I clenched my fists, listening. But there was only silence. Then, the whisper. A gurgling, choked whisper, like someone drowning. Come back. I bolted upright, fumbling for my flashlight, but when I turned it on, there was nothing. No footprints, no shadow, just the still, black lake. The next morning, we left as fast as we could, but as we drove away, I glanced at the lake one last time, and there, in the water, just beneath the surface, two pale hands, floating, waiting. My name is Ethan. Camping was supposed to be cheap, easy, and fun. That's what we thought when we planned a weekend trip to Ravens Creek, a secluded camping spot deep in the woods. No phone service, no noise, just nature. It sounded perfect, but we weren't alone. The first night was normal, laughing around the fire, telling ghost stories, roasting marshmallows. It wasn't until we went to sleep that things got strange. At around 3 a.m., I woke up needing to pee. Annoyed, I unzipped the tent as quietly as I could, stepping into the freezing night air. The fire had died down to a few glowing embers, casting faint red light over our campsite. That's when I saw it. Another tent. It was red, small, and sat about 20 feet away from ours. That made no sense. There had been no other tents when we arrived. We would have noticed if someone set up camp that close. But the worst part, the zipper was open. Not all the way, just a few inches. Just enough for someone inside to peek out. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Maybe someone arrived late. Maybe they set up camp while we were asleep. I turned back to wake up Liam, but then the zipper moved. Not fast, not like someone exiting the tent. Just a slow, gentle pull. Closing it, I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I waited, heart pounding, but nothing else happened. I rushed back into my tent, zipped it up as fast as I could, and tried to convince myself I imagined it. But in the morning, when the sun rose, I crawled out of my tent, and my blood went cold. The red tent was gone. No footprints, no signs of a campfire, no disturbed grass, just empty space. I turned to the others. Did you guys see anyone else here last night? Ava shook her head. No one's here but us. I didn't tell them what I saw. I didn't want to sound crazy. But when we packed up to leave, I noticed something. A small red fabric scrap stuck on a tree branch, fluttering in the wind. I grabbed it, and as soon as my fingers touched the material, I felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to look behind me. I turned, and deep in the woods, barely visible between the trees, a red tent dot unzipped, and this time, something inside was staring back. My name is Oliver. I've been camping since I was a kid. The woods have always felt like a second home to me. Predictable, safe. That changed last summer. That was when I learned that some forests whisper back. My friends and I set up camp in Blackwood Forest, a place known for its dense trees and eerie silence. The name should have been a warning, but we laughed it off. It was just another weekend trip, just another night in the wilderness. At around midnight, while we sat around the fire, I heard it, a voice, a whispered soft, like a breath against my ear. Don't look. I spun around, but there was no one there, just the thick forest pressing in on us. The others were too busy laughing at Ethan's dumb jokes to notice. I tried to brush it off, but minutes later, another whisper came. They're watching. This time, I jumped to my feet, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. Still, nothing. But when I turned back to my friends, I saw it just for a split second. A figure, standing behind Ava. Not close, not threatening, just standing, motionless, almost blending into the trees. I blinked, and it was gone. I wanted to say something, to warn them. But then I noticed something strange. The trees, they had shifted. The clearing we had set up camp in was smaller. Now, the trees were closer, closing in. I took a deep breath. Guys, I think we need to leave. Liam rolled his eyes. Dude, relax. "You're just paranoid." But I wasn't. I could feel it now, something watching, something waiting. The forest was breathing around us, shifting, adjusting, and then the whispers turned into laughter. Not ours, not human. It was everywhere, echoing between the trees, circling us. Low, distorted, like voices played in reverse. That's when the fire went out. Pitch darkness swallowed us. I fumbled for my flashlight, my hands shaking. When I turned it on, my stomach dropped. The trees had moved again. The open sky was gone. We were trapped. The trunks pressed in like a rib cage, suffocating us. And then I saw them. Eyes, dozens of them peering from between the trees, watching, waiting. We ran. Branches scratched my arms. Roots tripped my feet, but I didn't stop. I could still hear them, those voices, whispering, laughing, calling my name. It felt like hours before we finally broke free from the forest. Stumbling onto the empty dirt road where our car was parked, we didn't look back. We just drove. The next morning, curiosity got the better of me. I checked the forest's history online. There was no Blackwood Forest, no record of it ever existing. But I know what I saw, and sometimes, in the dead of night, I still hear the whispers, telling me to come back. My name is Daniel. It was supposed to be a fun weekend with my friends, just 4 of us, deep in the woods, away from the noise of the city. We set up our tents near a quiet lake, lit a fire, and laughed as the night fell. The air was crisp. The trees swayed gently, and everything felt peaceful. Until we saw him. At first, we thought he was just another camper. A man, sitting alone by his fire, just a few hundred meters away. He wasn't doing anything, just sitting, staring at the flames. He never moved, never cooked anything, never adjusted the fire, just sat there. It was Liam who first noticed something strange. "Guys, has he even blinked?" We laughed it off, but when we looked back at him, Liam was right. The man hadn't moved an inch since we first saw him. No shifting, no stretching, not even a single twitch. "He's probably just deep in thought," Ava suggested, but something about him made my stomach churn. Hours passed, and we tried to ignore him, playing card games, telling stories, pretending he wasn't there. But the moment my eyes wandered back to his fire, my heart nearly stopped. He was gone, no movement, no sound, just an empty log and a dying fire. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Where did he go? We scanned the woods with our flashlights. Nothing. No footsteps in the dirt, no sound of rustling leaves, just the distant hooting of an owl. Then Ethan whispered, "Look at our tents." We turned. The man was standing next to them. He wasn't looking at us. He wasn't even facing the tents. Just standing, stiff as a corpse, his back straight, his head slightly tilted, like he was listening. Ava screamed, and Liam grabbed a rock, ready to throw it. But before he could, the man did something that still haunts me. He tilted his head, further back, and further, and further, until his face was completely upside down. His neck cracked, his mouth stretched open too wide, too unnatural. Then he ran, but not like a person, not with normal steps. He moved like a flickering image, vanishing and reappearing between the trees, his body twisting and bending in ways that no human should be able to. We grabbed whatever we could and bolted to the car, leaving our tents, our gear, everything behind. We never went back to get them. A week later, a news article popped up. Missing campers found in the woods. Tents intact. No signs of struggle. Only one thing left behind. Charred remains of an old campfire, still burning. I swear, if I ever see another camper sitting alone in the woods, staring at a fire, I won't wait. I'll run, because next time, I might not be fast enough. My name is James. If I had known what was going to happen that night, I never would have gone to the cabin. I was hired by a man named Mr. Holloway to renovate his family's old mountain retreat. He was planning to sell it, and my job was sit a few nights there, check for structural issues, and make a list of repairs. I'd done dozens of similar jobs before, but something about this place felt wrong. The cabin stood alone at the peak of Black Ridge Mountain, surrounded by miles of dense forest. It was massive, 3 floors, a wraparound deck, and towering glass windows that overlooked the endless stretch of trees. But the moment I stepped inside, a wave of unease settled in my gut. It wasn't just the silence, it was the way the air felt heavy, thick, almost suffocating. I shook it off. That first day, I went through my usual routine, checking for leaks, inspecting the wooden beams, testing the electricity. Everything seemed normal until I found the basement. The door was hidden behind an old bookshelf in the study. I wouldn't have even noticed it if I hadn't been running my hands along the walls, looking for signs of rot. It wasn't locked. The wooden steps groaned under my weight as I descended into pitch-black darkness. The air smelled musty, like old wood and damp stone. My flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing a room much larger than I expected. And then, I saw them, rows of wooden chairs, dozens of them, all facing the same direction, as if they had been arranged for an audience. At the front of the room, there was a small wooden podium, and behind it a massive mirror, taller than me, stretching from floor to ceiling. I stepped closer, my own reflection flickering in the dim light. The mirror was old, the surface warped with time. That's when I noticed something that made my breath hitch. There were too many reflections. The room behind me was empty, but in the mirror, the chairs were filled. Dark figures sat in them, completely still, watching me. I spun around, my flashlight sweeping through the basement. Nothing. The chairs were empty, but in the mirror, the figures remained. And then, one of them stood up. I bolted. I scrambled up the stairs, shoving the bookshelf back into place, my heart slamming against my ribs. For the rest of the night, I refused to go near the study. I should have left. I should have driven back down the mountain and never looked back. But at exactly midnight, I woke up to a sound, a single, loud knock on the front door. I froze. It was the middle of a snowstorm. There were no roads leading up here, no hikers, no neighbors. Who the hell would be knocking? Another knock, dot, then another knock. Knock, 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 dot, slow, rhythmic, deliberate. I grabbed a flashlight and moved toward the front door, every instinct in my body screaming at me to turn back. I peered through the peephole. My blood went cold. There were 3 people standing on the porch, but they weren't dressed for the weather. They wore old-fashioned clothes, wool coats, dresses, boots, caked in mud. Their skin was pale, too pale, and their eyes were solid black, dot, no whites, no irises, just pure, endless darkness. The tallest one, a man, stepped closer, and then, without moving his lips, he spoke. "We saw you in the mirror." My hands trembled. My breath came in short, panicked gasps. Then, the second figure, a woman, leaned forward. "Let us in." My heart was hammering against my ribs. And then the third figure, a child, no older than 10, smiled. "It's rude to keep guests waiting." I stumbled back, gripping the doorknob with sweaty hands. I didn't know what to do. They weren't real. They couldn't be real. And yet, I could see their breath in the cold air. They were alive or something. Close to it. I turned and ran. The knocking grew louder, faster, echoing through the entire cabin. Every door, every window. Boom, 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 like hundreds of fists pounding against the walls. I locked myself in the bedroom, heart racing. Then silence. No more knocking. No more voices. Just the sound of the wind howling outside. I barely slept. When morning came, I crept toward the front door. There were no footprints in the snow. No sign that anyone had been there at all. But when I glanced at the living room window, the mirror from the basement was now standing in the center of the room, and in its reflection, the three figures were still there, smiling, waiting, watching. My name is Daniel. I never liked attics. Something about the dust, the darkness, the forgotten things left to rot and silence it always made me uneasy. So when my girlfriend, Megan, and I rented a remote mountain cabin for a quiet weekend, I was relieved to see it had no attic door. At least, that's what I thought. The first night was peaceful. Snow fell outside, the fireplace crackled, and everything felt cozy. But around 2 a.m., I woke up to a noise, a soft creaking. I sat up, listening. It was coming from above us, from the attic. My stomach dropped. That didn't make sense. There was no attic, or so I had thought. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped into the hallway. That's when I saw it. A hatch in the ceiling. It hadn't been there before. I was sure of it. Megan appeared behind me, rubbing her eyes. "What are you doing?" I pointed at the hatch. "That wasn't there yesterday." She frowned. "Of course it was." I stared at her. "No, it wasn't." Before I could stop her, she reached up and pulled the string. The hatch swung open with a long, groaning creak. A wooden ladder slid down. A wave of cold air rushed past us, and then, from the darkness above, something moved. Not footsteps, not a scurrying animal. Something breathing, slow, shallow. Watching, Megan took a step back. "Daniel, close it." I grabbed the ladder, ready to shove it back up. But something grabbed my wrist. A hand, thin, pale, too many fingers. I yanked away, slamming the hatch shut and locking it. My heart was pounding out of my chest. We didn't sleep after that. At dawn, we packed up, ready to leave. But before we walked out, I looked up one last time. The attic hatch was gone. Not just closed, completely gone, like it had never existed. But as we stepped outside, I glanced up at the roof of the cabin, and there, hidden beneath the wooden beams, a small, square window, and behind it a face, watching us leave. My name is Nathan. When my best friend Ryan invited me to his family's mountain cabin, I didn't hesitate. A weekend away from the city, surrounded by snowy peaks. Sounded perfect. The cabin was old but charming, built decades ago by Ryan's grandfather. It had a rustic feel, with wooden beams and a large fireplace. But something felt off. There was a door at the end of the hallway that led to a guest bedroom. At least, that's what Ryan told me. But every time I tried to open it, it was locked. "The key's probably lost," he said with a shrug. "It's just storage anyway." That night, I woke up thirsty. The cabin was silent, except for the faint crackling of the fire downstairs. As I walked past the hallway, I noticed something strange. The locked door was open. I hesitated. Inside, the room was completely empty. No furniture, no dust, no sign of anyone ever using it. Just smooth wooden floors and bare walls. Something about it unnerved me. I turned to go back to bed, then froze. The door to my room was gone, not closed, not blocked, gone. The hallway was different now, shorter, the walls closer. The only thing left was the open guest room. Waiting behind me, my pulse pounded. I ran down the stairs, calling Ryan's name, but the living room was wrong too. The furniture was missing. The windows weren't where they had been. The fireplace was still crackling, but there was no heat. It was like the cabin had shifted, like it wasn't the same place anymore. I sprinted back upstairs. My only hope was to get back to where I had started. But when I reached the hallway, the guest room was gone. Just solid wall where the door had been. And then, a whisper. "You shouldn't have opened it." My vision blurred. My head spun. The world around me collapsed. Then I woke up, back in my bed. Sunlight streamed through the window. Everything was normal. The hallway, the furniture, my room, it was all exactly as it had been before. Had it been a dream, a hallucination? I tried to shake it off. But when I glanced at the end of the hallway, my stomach twisted. The door to the guest room was gone. Not locked, not open, just gone, as if it had never existed at all. My name is Mark. A weekend in a mountain cabin sounded perfect. Just me, my wife Claire, and the untouched beauty of the snowy peaks. We arrived just before sunset, the sky painted in deep oranges and purples. The cabin was cozy, with large windows that overlooked the frozen forest. It felt peaceful, safe, until night fell. We were sitting by the fireplace, sipping wine, when Claire froze mid-sentence. Her eyes locked on the large window facing the forest. "Mark," she whispered, "someone's out there." I turned quickly, my heart hammering. At first, I saw nothing, just the dark woods stretching endlessly. Then I noticed it, a figure, standing at the edge of the trees, not moving, not blinking, just watching us. "Probably a lost hiker," I muttered, though something felt wrong. He was too still. And then, just as I was about to grab my flashlight, he took a step forward, not like a normal person. No shifting weight, no movement of his arms, just a jerky, unnatural step, like a puppet being pulled forward. Claire gripped my arm, locked the door. I moved fast, securing every lock in the cabin. But when I returned to the window, the man was gone. I exhaled, relieved. Maybe he THUDA, loud bang, from the other side of the cabin. I rushed to the back door. It was still locked, but through the small window beside it, I saw something that made my blood freeze. His face, pressed against the glass, mouth open, eyes wide, staring. His lips began to move, but no sound came out. Just silent words, forming over and over again. "Let me in." I grabbed Claire's hand. "We're leaving now." I didn't care about our bags, the food, or the cozy weekend. We ran to the car and sped down the icy mountain road, hearts pounding. By the time we reached town, we could finally breathe again. The next morning, I checked the news out of curiosity. What I found still haunts me. A local article, dated 30 years ago. Missing man found frozen near abandoned cabin. Cause of death unknown. Witnesses claim to have seen him walking long after he had died. The photo attached. The man at our window. My name is Alex. Spending a weekend in a remote mountain cabin sounded like the perfect escape. No noise, no distractions, just me, my girlfriend Emily, and the endless view of the snow-covered peaks. The cabin itself was old but well-maintained. Wooden floors creaked under our steps, and the fireplace filled the place with warmth. But there was one door that felt off. It was locked. The owner never mentioned it when he handed us the keys. When I asked Emily, she just shrugged. Probably just a storage room. But that night, I woke up to a sound. A slow, rhythmic knocking coming from the locked door. I held my breath, listening. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the old wood settling. It was deliberate. Knock. I shook Emily awake. "Do you hear that?" She frowned, still half asleep. "What are you talking about?" The knocking stopped. The room was silent. The fire in the living room had burned down to embers, casting faint orange light on the walls. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the hallway. The locked door was still there, still shut. Then, just as I turned away, the handle twisted. A sharp, metallic click echoed through the cabin. The door was unlocking from the inside. I didn't wait. I ran back to the bedroom, locked the door, and forced myself to breathe. Emily was wide awake now. "What's wrong?" I pointed at the hallway. Someone's in the locked room. She shook her head. That's not possible. We checked the whole cabin. I wanted to believe her. But then, the bedroom door handle twisted. Slowly, I grabbed the nearest thing, a lamp, and held my breath. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The house fell silent. We didn't sleep. We just waited, frozen, until the sun finally rose. And, in the morning, when we checked the hallway again, the locked door was wide open. Inside, there was no furniture, no storage, just an empty room. The only thing in it was a single wooden chair, facing the corner. On the seat, there was a deep, worn-out groove, as if someone had been sitting there for a long, long time, watching. My name is Matthew. I never thought of basements as scary places. Growing up, our basement was just a cluttered storage space, boxes filled with Christmas decorations, old furniture, things nobody wanted but couldn't throw away. So when I moved into my new house and saw that it had a large basement, I barely gave it a second thought. I should have. The first few days were uneventful. I moved in, unpacked, and started settling into my new routine. But on the first night, something strange happened. I was lying in bed when I heard a dull thud from below, like something falling over in the basement. I figured I had stacked a box. Wrong. So I went downstairs to check. The basement was silent when I got there. Nothing had fallen. Nothing was out of place. But when I turned to go back upstairs, saw something that made my stomach drop. There was a door I hadn't noticed before. It was on the farthest wall, hidden behind a shelf. A door that shouldn't be there. It was old, much older than the rest of the house. The wood was dark, almost black, with deep scratch marks along the edges. It had a handle, but no keyhole. I reached for it. The moment my fingers touched the handle, a wave of nausea hit me. A sharp, suffocating pressure in my chest, like the air had been sucked out of the room. I let go. The feeling disappeared. I backed away, my pulse hammering. I didn't sleep that night. The voice over the next few days, I tried to ignore the door. I even considered nailing it shut. But every night, at exactly 3:15 a.m., I would hear it. A voice. Not loud, not clear. Just a whisper, coming from behind the door. At first, I told myself it was the pipes, or the wind. But then, the whispers turned into knocking. Soft, insistent, like something trapped, like something that knew I was listening. One night I finally worked up the courage to speak. "Who's there?" I whispered. Silence. Then, just when I thought I imagined it, a voice, my voice, whispered back, "Let me out." I ran. The wrong basement. That was the night I decided to leave. I packed my bags, ready to abandon the house for good. But when I reached the front door, something wasn't right. The hallway looked wrong. The walls were too close together. The ceiling too low. The air too thick. I turned back toward the living room. It was gone. Instead, in every direction, concrete walls, shelves, boxes. I was in the basement. My heart slammed against my ribs. I had just been upstairs. How then? I saw the door, the black door. Only now, it was open, and standing just beyond it, in the impossible darkness, was someone who looked exactly like me. Smiling, he reached out a hand. "You finally let me out, Nowie. Don't know how long I've been here. There's no way out. No stairs, no windows. Just concrete walls, and the black door. And sometimes, when I press my ear against it, I can hear him. Living my life, answering my phone, going to work, laughing with my friends. No one knows I'm gone, and no one ever will. Because now, I'm the one trapped in the basement, waiting for someone else to open the door." My name is Daniel. When I moved into my grandmother's old house, I expected it to feel empty. She had passed away months ago, leaving the house to me in her will. It was a big place, too big for one person. But it was free, and I wasn't about to turn down a free home. The only part of the house that truly unsettled me was the basement. Not because it was dark or old, not because of the smell of damp wood, but because every night I heard something moving inside the walls. I told myself it was just the house settling. Maybe mice, maybe pipes. But deep down, I knew something was inside the walls, and it was watching me. The first time I saw it, I was doing laundry. The washing machine was old, shaking slightly as it ran, filling the basement with a low hum. That's when I noticed a crack in the cement wall. Thin, jagged, just big enough to see through. I don't know why I leaned in, but when I did, something moved. Just a shadow, barely visible in the darkness beyond the wall. Then, a single eye opened. I stumbled back, heart pounding. I stared at the crack for a long time, waiting for it to happen again. But nothing moved. Not until I turned away and heard the sound of fingernails scratching the other side. The second sign that night, I locked my bedroom door. I told myself it was just my imagination, that I was tired, that it was just the shadows playing tricks on me. But at 3:12 a.m., I woke up not because of a noise, because of a smell, something rotting. I sat up, my stomach twisting. That's when I noticed my closet door. It was open. I never leave it open. I reached for my phone, my hands trembling, turning on the flashlight hand. That's when I saw them bangers, pale, too long, reaching out from inside the closet, and then they slid back into the wall. The last night he barely slept. After that, I should have left, but I didn't. I don't know why. Maybe because I knew it wasn't finished with me yet. The next night, I moved my bed away from the walls. I kept the lights on. I didn't blink at exactly 3:12 a.m. It started again. The scratching got soft at first, then harder, more frantic. I gripped my blanket, my entire body frozen. Then, the whisper, right next to my ear, "Let me out." I screamed. I ran from the room, down the stairs, into the basement, desperate to escape. But the moment I reached the bottom step, I stopped. The crack in the basement wall was wider now, and through it, I saw a face, my face smiling. I don't remember what happened next, just darkness. Now I don't live in the house anymore, but sometimes, late at night, I hear scratching in the walls of my apartment. It's closer now, and I know it's still trying to get out. My name is Eric. I never believed in ghosts. Not until I moved into this house. It wasn't anything special, just an old two-story house with a basement. The landlord had given me a good deal, almost too good. But I didn't ask questions. I should have. The first night, I heard scratching. It came from below. I was in bed, half asleep, when the sound woke me up. A soft, slow dragging against the basement floor, like nails on concrete. I told myself it was mice, but when I went down the next morning, there were scratches on the walls, not like claw marks, more like words. Faint, scribbled letters, barely visible in the dim light. "Let me out." I told myself it had always been there, that I was just noticing it now. But that night, the scratching got louder, and this time, it was followed by whispers. I couldn't make out the words, just a voice, low and hoarse, speaking from the other side of the basement door. I didn't sleep. By the third night, the whispers turned into knocking, slow, rhythmic, deliberate, like something trapped. I stood at the top of the basement stairs, staring at the door. My hand hovered over the handle. Somewhere deep in my gut, I knew I shouldn't open it. Then, at exactly 3 a.m., the whispering stopped, and instead, I heard breathing right next to my ear. I spun around, my heart hammering. No one was there, but I could still feel it. The presence, the weight of something standing too close, just beyond my vision. I locked the basement door. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The man in the basement. Next morning, I went to work, trying to push everything out of my mind. When I came home, the house was too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't feel normal. The kind that feels watched. I stepped inside and froze. The basement door was open, wide open. My stomach turned to ice. There was no way. I locked it. I reached for my phone, my fingers trembling. But before I could call anyone, I heard it. The sound of footsteps, slow, heavy steps. Coming from inside the basement, I backed away. Then a man walked out, except he wasn't really a man. His skin was gray, his eyes too wide, his mouth hanging slightly open, as if he was trying to speak, but had forgotten how. His clothes were old, faded, torn, like he had been wearing them for decades. But the worst part, he looked exactly like me, a perfect copy. I couldn't breathe. My mind raced, trying to understand what I was seeing. Then he smiled, and in my own voice, he whispered finally. Then he ran at me. I don't remember much after that, just the terror. The way my body refused to move, my brain screaming at me to react, to run. But I was frozen. The last thing I saw was his hands, reaching for me. Then, everything went black. The other side, I woke up in the basement. The air was damp, the floor cold beneath my hands. I scrambled up, my head pounding. The door to the house was closed. I rushed up the stairs and grabbed the handle. Locked, I banged against it, shouting, but then, I heard footsteps dot from the other side, and then, a voice, my voice dot soft, calm, don't bother. It's my house now. My blood ran cold. I slammed my fists against the door. Let me out. But he just chuckled. Then his footsteps retreated, and I was alone. For days. I screamed. I banged. I tried to break the door down, but no one came. No one ever came. And now I understand. I was never supposed to open the door. I was never supposed to let him out. Now I wait. I scratch at the walls. I whisper to the next person who moves in. And at night, I knock, 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 because one day, someone will open the door again, and I'll be free. My name is Adam. I never used the basement in my house. It was always cold, always damp, and something about it just felt off. But I never had a reason to go down there until the light started turning on by itself. At first I thought it was faulty wiring. Old houses did that sometimes. But when I checked the switch upstairs, it was always off. And yet, when I looked down the basement stairs, the light was on, faint, flickering, like someone was waiting down there. I told myself it was nothing. But every night, the light would turn on again. One night, I had enough. I grabbed a flashlight and stormed down the stairs, determined to prove to myself that it was just my imagination. But halfway down, the light switched off. The basement was suddenly pitch black. The air felt wrong, heavy, like something was in the dark with me. I turned on my flashlight and scanned the room. Nothing, just the old shelves, a broken chair, some dust-covered boxes. But as I turned to go back up, my flashlight flickered and, for half a second, I saw something, a figure, standing in the corner, facing the wall. My blood ran cold. I bolted up the stairs, slamming the door shut behind me. That night, I locked the basement and pushed a heavy chair in front of the door. I barely slept the next night at exactly 3 a.m. I woke up to a sound, scraping, a slow, deliberate dragging sound, coming from the basement. Then a single knock. I held my breath. Another knock. Then the basement light switched on. I grabbed a bat from under my bed and crept toward the basement door. Heart hammering, slowly, I reached for the doorknob. It was warm, like someone had been holding it from the other side. I yanked my hand away, breathing hard. Then I heard something I will never forget. A voice. low, scratched, not quite human. "Come down, Adam." I ran. I spent the rest of the night in my car, parked down the street, shaking. The final night he called an electrician the next day, desperate for a logical explanation. But when he arrived, he gave me a confused look. "There's no light down there," he said. I stared at him. "What?" He gestured toward the ceiling. "No wiring, no bulb, no fixture. You don't have a basement light." I didn't argue. I didn't stay. I packed my bags and left that house forever. But sometimes, when I drive past it, I glance at the basement window, and every time the light is on. My name is Jason. I never liked the basement in my new house. Something about it felt wrong. It wasn't just the cold or the damp smell of old wood and concrete. It was the way the shadows seemed to linger just a second too long when I turned off the light. I told myself I was imagining it until I found the door. It happened while I was clearing out old junk. I pushed a heavy shelf aside, and behind it, buried beneath years of dust and cobwebs, was a door I had never seen before. A door that shouldn't exist. It wasn't like the others in the house. It was old. The wood cracked and splintered like it had been forgotten for decades. There was no dust on the handle like it had been used recently. I hesitated. My house wasn't that old. There was no way I could have missed this door. I tried the handle. Locked. That should have been the end of it. But that night, as I lay in bed, something woke me. A knock dot from the basement. My blood ran cold. I sat up, heart pounding. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe it was just the house settling. Knock dot knock dot knock dot, slow, deliberate. I grabbed my flashlight and crept downstairs, my breath shaky. The basement was pitch black, except for the weak beam of my light. And then I saw it. The door was open. A thin sliver of darkness yawned behind it, too dark. My flashlight beam didn't penetrate it. It was like the doorway led to nothingness. Then, a hand reached out, pale, thin, too long. The fingers stretched toward me, slow, unnatural, like they had never moved before, like they had been waiting. I couldn't breathe. Then the fingers twitched. I ran. I bolted up the stairs, slammed the basement door shut, and locked it. My heart pounded in my chest as I pressed my back against the wood. Waiting. Silence, then dash knock. Knock knock, right on the other side. I had stayed there until sunrise, when I finally built up the courage to check again. The door was gone. The wall was solid brick, like it had never been there. But I know what I saw, and sometimes, late at night, I still hear it. Knock, 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 waiting.